Welcome to the adventures of self. Conversations with ordinary and extraordinary people as they explore what it means to be self-expressed. Come on in. Join the adventure. Hey there, adventurers. Welcome to our final episode of the year. Happy New Year to you all, whether you're on this side or the other of the 2021-2022 divide. This is episode 55B. Maybe it shows up as episode 56. But this is a special two-part year-end review of all that we've created in this first year and first season of The Adventures of Self. And thank you all for your support and listening. If you aren't already, I would love to encourage you to follow us, support us on whatever channel you listen to this on, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, TuneIn, wherever you find us, and on a number of channels like YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. You can leave us reviews and comments, which we greatly appreciate. It's a great way to get our message out to the rest of the world and to notify people who may not be aware that this is a great show, that we are really here to support everyone else in their own adventure of self-discovery, their own adventure of self-expression. So Happy New Year. This special two-part series, as I said, is a year in review. Last week we walked through the first 30 episodes we had this year, and we're going to walk through the rest this episode, but also give some pointers and some ideas of where we're going and what we've learned along the way. And nothing would be possible without you all, the listener. I could just be talking to myself, and sometimes maybe it does feel like that, but really we do have support, and I want to thank you all for that. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook, where we put out regular posts that highlight what each week is about, maybe what we've done in the past, and also it's a really great way to get little snippets. Sometimes people don't have the ability to listen to a whole hour and 15 minute episode, and so we put out quotes, we put out little 30-second to 2-minute video blocks that help people see what this is about, and hopefully give some inspiration in everybody's own adventures. So I just want to pick up where we left off. And so the format, if you haven't listened to last week, we're just going through each of the episodes. We managed to record 54 conversations episodes this year in a weekly format. Somehow we managed to fit now 56 episodes in a 52-week year. I am a magician and alchemist of sorts, so that worked out pretty well. So I want to pick up and I'm reviewing things in sort of 6 episode blocks, just to give you a sense of who we've spoken to, what we've talked about. And the idea is, maybe you look at a past episode and think that it's only relevant to August or February or something. The idea behind this show was really to have quite timeless conversations. There's very little topical information that is dated. These conversations and the information that we curate is intended to last the test of time, and they really speak to the human condition that we all face, obviously, and the struggles we face. Right, we're all trying to be self-expressed in one way or another, and we all face struggles and difficulties in that. And I'm keenly aware of what that has meant for me, and in the business I run as a personal development life coach, using intuition It is a it's an aspect of who we are as humans, that we strive to create things. There are things that we want to do in our world, in our lives, however we define that. That may be a family, that may be a country, a business, whatever. And so there are things that we strive to accomplish and to achieve and to share and to create. And that doesn't come without its struggle, without its challenges. And yet, throughout history, people have overcome their own limitations, their own challenges. And this show has been about really diving into that, right? To see all the different flavors of how that shows up. And I don't want to go through each episode that we looked at last week, but go back and listen to last week, because the idea is, rather than randomly scrolling through, that you actually get a sense of what we've spoken to people about, and if there's something that really speaks to you, whether it's a guest, whether it's a title, whatever it is, I really encourage you to dig deeper. I've had a chance to re-listen to most, if not all, of the episodes. Sometimes I don't always get a chance to re-listen to them after we record them, because I'm always on to the next one. But when I do, it really is amazing, because there's so much. I'm kind of overwhelmed by the amount of gold and wisdom that's in it. Not really a credit to me. It's a credit to the structure that I've set up, and the conversations that I curate with guests. We spend some time before we start recording to really tune into and decide what it is that we want to focus on for the time we're together. So there's a container, there's a focus, there is a central theme to what it is that we are looking to create, to share with you all. And then, of course, in the conversation, things come up, new things come up, and we create from that, right? We create a guide for what it means to have dialogue. In many ways, with a lot that's happened over the last year or so, and even if you look 10, 20 years before that with social media, it's not lost on anybody that we're in a more and more polarized world. And my personal belief is that when you actually sit down with one or several other human beings and have conversations, really sit down to listen and share what's important with you, but to listen to what's important with somebody else, not to prove them wrong or not to be proved wrong, but just to share. That's how we learn to grow. That's how we learn to grow individually and collectively. Cool. So I do want to, as I say, give you an overview of what happened after episode 30. So we went up to 54. So in episode 31, I met with Charlie Sheldon and talked about the life of a writer. Charlie is the author, most recently, of the Strongheart series of books, which is a trilogy. The third one, I think, just came out in a couple months ago, so it's a complete trilogy now. And speaking to Charlie, there was this real sense of, for me, of speaking to a bit of a modern day Hemingway or a Jack London, and by that I mean somebody who goes out, lives a gritty, quite physical life, and still has the wherewithal and even the drive to write about that, to share what that is, but also to create stories from it. Right, this is not a nonfiction sort of account of what his life's been, but his life has influenced what he writes about. So Charlie was a commercial fisherman in his early years, and spent decades managing seaports around around the U.S. and maybe some internationally in management and consulting. And then, quite remarkably, at the age of 65, when most people would be thinking about retiring, Charlie decided to become a merchant sailor, which had been a dream of his ever since being a fisherman. And so he went back to sea, and spent several years as a merchant sailor, and has settled in the Pacific Northwest. and really uses his time to wonder what if, to look at legends, to actually think about recreating legends, and to allow for what some may call outrageous ideas to emerge, and then to share, to explore how to translate those. Because if you look at the scientific revolutions of the past, many of them actually started with outrageous ideas. Moving on from that, in episode 32, we talked all about love, which is a bit of a shift, but a beautiful conversation nonetheless with Sarah Louise Ryan. Sarah is a dating coach who you know had has worked as a matchmaker. I should even say a matchmaker, and in this world of apps, and the this ubiquitous availability of pictures and connections and seemingly right matches for love, we're kind of we're overstimulated, we're inundated, we're overwhelmed with choice, one would say. And then we talk about the paradox of choice, right? That the choice can actually be not liberating, but can actually be stultifying, um, can feel paralyzing. And building on that, I remember being very struck by just one short phrase that Sarah shared, which that love is about choice. And I think we have this sense, and I certainly had this romantic notion from maybe my teenage years, that love happens, and we're going to meet the one, and everything's going to sort of fall into place. But that kind of avoids the practicalities of what it means for two completely sovereign individuals to come together, and what it means to create a relationship and create love from that. Of course, there has to be some level of attraction, whether that's physical or emotional or intellectual, or whatever it is, to create the relationship, let alone sustain it. And I was really struck by this sense of that not only is love is about choice from the very beginning, but that it continues to be about choice. That we're always choosing the love that we want to create. It's a personal connection, or spark for me, because a lot of the work I do is about choice and choosing, and I don't think I'd really thought about the choice of love. Um, Sarah also talks about the assumption and disappointments that come with relationship, and focusing on values. What your values are as a foundation for the type of relationship that you want to create. In episode 33, I spoke with Spencer Madden, and we had a really beautiful and quite long and but very powerful conversation in the moment. And Spencer and I really spoke about presence, about consciousness, about awareness. It's a deep but very profound conversation about what it means to back to choice, choosing to be present. And there can be quite a bit of pain in actually really being present. If we've got sadness or anger, what it means to really be present with that, and how to move beyond what we assume that is. Oftentimes we want to get away from these seemingly uncomfortable or unsettling feelings and emotions, and yet they provide a great guide for us. The conversation has quite a mystical element to it. I remarked that it was episode 33, which has all sorts of mystical components to it. Look it up on the internet, or have your own awareness. And this had a very fifth dimension quality to it. Moving beyond the three dimensions of space that we know, and even the fourth dimension of time, into a further dimension, a higher dimension still. And one of the sort of the central themes that Spencer and I get into is this concept of remembering, undoing the programming of society's systems to remember our soul's truth. And I just want to break even that word down, remembering. Um, I think Jungian analyst I read spoke about this word and broke it down like this, right? We are actually putting ourselves back together, remembering to integrate, to become whole, and we are remembering the parts of us that have become cut off. We are bringing those back into our awareness, bringing those back into our consciousness, and then and integrating them. In episode 34, I spoke with Sam Led, who was one of these sort of brother from another mother um, uh, people that I meet on the podcast. The episode "The Brain as a Computer" was a fascinating look into seeing the brain as a metaphor for as an operating system. Right? Sorry, maybe seeing the brain as a computer as a metaphor that we have so much assumption that we are our mind, we are our mental thoughts and capacities, and yet it's only a filter, right? Whether you consider it an operating system, the hardware, it's not the underlying technology, right? That creates something like that, and we identify with our brains and our minds and our thoughts so much, and yet they're only a filter. You know, this the what sits behind that, what sits beneath that, is a deeper, more solemn truth that Sam and I get into. You know, the truth of the heart. You know, the brain glitches like a computer. It has moments where it sort of misfires. And sometimes we have to hit Control Alt Delete or restart or reboot our computer. Probably the same is true for our brains, but our heart, our soul that sits underneath that doesn't. Right? It's and so we talk about polishing the lens of the heart to its true diamond core underneath. In episode 35, I spoke with Christopher Swift, artist Christopher Swift out of South Africa, in the episode Changing Perspectives. And this was a sort of a deeply, in a way, personal journey, conversation for both of us. In particular for Christopher, talking about his journey from a very free spirited artist into the world of fatherhood, and how this life, we really lift the lid on the concept of adventure. That everything is an adventure, and there is a call to adventure. We are all called to adventure of one sort or another, and how you choose to hear or heed that call is up to you. Life is an adventure if you choose to see it that way. Life is an adventure if you choose it. And of course, on an adventure, there are no guarantees. There are no guarantees in this life. You are your guarantee. But that doesn't make the adventure any less enjoyable, or in a way any more scary, right? It's the perspective and the attitude and the energy that we choose to bring to it. And the other really interesting thing about this conversation that came through, particularly for two men who are quite active in their lives, was this idea of taking time for things to unfold and the beauty that allows. We're so caught up in a sense of doing, and always having to get things done, that we often don't really take time to allow things to emerge, and holding the tension when we don't know what's certain, when we don't have that guarantee, when we're at the precarious side of the adventure, can feel quite scary, and yet often there is something quite beautiful and special about allowing whatever is going to be there to emerge. In episode 36, I spoke with Phil Palooka, who is the founder of the company Billionaires and Boxers. And the episode is capitalizing on connections. And I have to say that this was another sort of challenging episode for me personally. Nothing to do with Phil per se, just what he presented. And it's in the title of the show, capitalizing on connections. There was this real sense of, using the connections you have to capitalize personally, and in business, and really thinking about what it is, who it is you're surrounding yourself with, and connecting with, to and being very thoughtful in that. Not to say that there isn't chance, and then we're not open to meeting new people. Of course we are. But to really think about, regardless of who your connections are, and who you meet, to learn how to capitalize on those in whatever way you decide. And I think for me, there was a sense of what this means from a business or a financial perspective, but it helped me think about things in a broader sense as well. It harkens back to something we spoke about in, I think it was episode 12 with Lindsay Bouvier, on the sense that we're all brands, and so we all have connections. We're all a business of some sort or another. Certainly in this sort of presentation, social media, podcast world, and what to do with that. There's also a lot of humility in this, and learning from mistakes. Phil and I share a few stories of falling flat on our faces, and learning from that. One of my mentors said in life that I love to share is, I've made so many mistakes in life. I've learned so much from my mistakes in life. I'm thinking of making a few more. And Phil also talks about, as a sole business owner, what it means to be setting boundaries for success. Oftentimes we can think that we don't have the time to do that. We don't have the luxury to do that. But Phil, lays out the importance of doing that for your health, for your sanity, and for the success of whatever it is, whatever venture, business, or otherwise that you have. That it's a structure. And it's a structure that's designed to support you. So I'll just take a little bit of a break now from the episodes, and share a little bit. The thing I noticed about it was interesting for me to come at this from this sort of 6 episode block, and to share here, because in itself that had its own structure, and I could see, even though when I was in the midst of it throughout the year, there wasn't really any rhyme or reason to it, that now at the end of the year, coming to this sort of 6 episode, 6 block review, that there's something in the consolidation, or putting these together in groups of 6, and I had this sense in this grouping, whatever this is, 31 to 36, it's like what it means to be maturing, right? As if I'm going into my 30s. We're kind of not children anymore, and it's true even in the episodes of what it means to be a man as well. Like the all of these episodes, even the one with Sarah Louise about love, really called into question for me personally what it means to be a man. I mean, I think all the other guests in this were men. So, really got to me about what it is I'm writing, my connections, my perspective, and, what my travels and life situation have meant and mean to me. and who do I meet along the way? It's something that Christopher and I got into in episode 35. That really looks at the hero's journey in the sense that when you're on this adventure, you're going to meet allies, you're going to meet other people along the way, and how are they going to support or help you in where you want to go. So that was really really interesting to see. Like as I say, to in this sort of artificial grouping, just for the sake of putting this podcast out, there is a new learning that comes quite beautifully, quite magically. In episode 37, I spoke with Amanda Hill Ryal about exploring and expressing inspiration. Amanda is quite an inspiration in herself. She had a lot of personal struggles with her own sense of self, confidence, and ability to handle anger and frustration. And, she's one of those, I suppose, when you look at the tagline for the podcast, she's one of those quote unquote ordinary people, and I think she would say the same. Although living an extraordinary adventure, she's a mother and a wife and a school teacher, and what she noticed was that her own issues had relevance for the school children that she was teaching, the young children. She teaches children under the age of 10. And how they are also dealing with the same struggles I was talking about at the beginning, the limitations that we assume about ourselves, and wanted to support them, help them in a very specific way. And so she's written a series of books called the Mood Muncher series, how to munch, how to gobble up the moods that you have. And one of the things that Amanda and I get into is this distinction in English versus some of the other languages, like Latin-based languages, for instance. That in English we have this sense that I am something. I am happy. I am angry. But in other languages they talk about I have sadness. I have joy. Right. And so it's a difference of how we identify with that. And how to use that, and that was sort of central to how she uses the emotions that children go through to literally have a surrogate for something that represents a particular emotion, rather than assuming that just because there is an emotion of sadness that defines the child as sad per se. In episode 38, we took a very sharp turn into radically different territory with my friend Alison Pilling, and to the episode Let's Talk About Sex. So Alison is a sexological body worker and has been for many, many years, and brought an understanding to me of really opened the door on something that I had very little awareness of in terms of even that something like this, a career like this existed. And building on like what I looked at in the relationship sphere, it was really fascinating to think about just being honest with what it is we're dealing with. Sex is, well, none of us would be here on this planet if not for the intercourse of our biological parents. So it is central to the life we live, and yet, although we have all sorts of things that accentuate or try to provide sexual entertainment or connection, we don't often look at what's underneath it, right? And the struggles that we have, what it takes to be honest about what we don't know about sexuality and what we want to know about it. So we speak about things like Tantra and the real sexual basis, the energetic, I should say, sexual basis of Tantra, and how to bring consciousness into sexuality, how to bring consciousness into sex, the act, and how to experiment with sexuality and consciousness in things like conscious kink. Um, in episode 39, I spoke with a very dear friend of mine, Daniela Lanaya, about restoring the balance. Daniela, I've known for many, many years, and I was very happy to have her on the show because, you know, sometimes you know somebody in life, or you meet somebody who really talks their talk, who walks their walk, and Daniela, for me, is one of those persons. Um, she's a very, very gentle soul who has gone through an enormous amount of personal turmoil, um, but in order to bring balance and restoration to others, and more importantly, to the world, to this great mother that we call Earth. And Daniela is a musician. She is a yoga and shamanic healer, a yoga instructor, and not even an instructor, but a yogic healer, and shamanic healer and practitioner. And she uses nature as a muse, and as an inspiration for living life. It's a subject that's very dear to me, so I was very happy to have and to record this conversation with her. We sort of have a very brother-sister relationship that we've developed over the years, soul brothers and sisters. And we talk about the balance of masculine and feminine in all of us, in us individually and collectively, and in nature. And how, in essence, these words, masculine and feminine, they're placeholders for things that are much bigger than what we would consider gender or sexuality. The Eastern concepts of yin and yang are probably more appropriate, although they don't have as much currency or relevance to our Western audiences. And ultimately, this episode is about restoring sacred pathways, both within us and outside of us, without us, and how all of this, everything that's happening in our worlds today, everything you see in the macro environment out in the world today, is a reflection of our own individual and collective thoughts. In episode 40, I spoke with Christina Valeska about the soul's journey. Christina is somebody I met over the summer when I was vacationing or living in Corfu, Greece. And it's a great sort of not coincidence, but providence to be able to meet somebody and to know almost immediately that it's somebody who I want to explore a conversation with, and to bring that to a wider audience. And Christina has a deep understanding of her own process and a desire to bring healing, to bring therapy to others through movement, through yoga, through health, through body, and through emotional practices. And this all started from her own personal struggles growing up in Germany with a very strict family, and how she had a very transformational, some of us have very slow experiences where we change, and others have very abrupt experiences. And Christina's one of those where she went on a silent retreat in her early 20s in Thailand, really knowing nothing about it, and had a profound transformational experience, and has sort of been living through that and with that for a couple decades since. And how all of this, what she's come to and what she brings is a sense of awareness. And if you look at spiritual practices around the world, you will see that awareness is the key, right? And awareness brings choice. Awareness is not always easy, right? We sometimes want to avoid the things that we don't want to see, but hiding them, pushing them away, doesn't make them go away. And so bringing light to them, having awareness for who we are, how we show up, what what is actually just happening to us is very powerful, because when you have awareness for where you are, then you have choice. Yeah. In episode 41, I spoke with somebody else I met in Greece, Karina Notovali, a Swedish woman who has written the first book in a trilogy, and the episode Daring to Try. So Karina had a very interesting experience that she used as a starting point to explore her own existence and a much larger question about our existence in the world, in this universe. And Karina's birth certificate lists the father as "quote unquote" unknown. So there's a great question for her as to what that could be, who that is. And so she wrote a book, Dad, Where Are You? That also is a placeholder for a larger dad, a larger father, the Christian and masculinized concept of God as a father, and her experience in the church, and what that means for her as a woman, trying to understand her own place in society. We talk a lot about mysticism, the spiritual experiences, and the similarity between those and creating. Karina talks about that as a writer as well, and how to live from your heart by, as the title of the episode implies, how to live from your heart by daring to try. And a lot of this comes from this paradoxical ability to hold seemingly contradicting opposites. We talk about the integration of Eastern and Western philosophy, and more importantly, or more centrally, more fundamentally, the integration of the rational and the irrational. We have such a "quote unquote" rational world that we live in, and it ignores and tries to cut off the irrational as something that is unpleasant or unknown or impossible to define and limit, and yet it always is there. It always shows up. So the ability is there to actually integrate that, to bring this in as a conscious practice, and it actually is a fundamental element, if not, anyway, not the only one, but a fundamental element in creating anything, whether that's a book, a podcast, a relationship, the balance and the integration of the rational and the irrational. In episode 42, I spoke with Christina Kotori about archetypes, myths, and service. And Christina is also somebody I met in Corfu. She actually gave me a ride to the airport, and it's a funny little story because we were on a sort of group chat, and she offered to give me a ride. When she picked me up, in the first minute or so, I asked her, or we asked each other, what our interests were or what we did, and she said that she was a modern day Greek priestess who worked with mythology and archetypes. And I said, great. Well, you definitely are coming on my podcast because we have so much in common. And I love mythology. It's something I use in my personal development. It's something I use in my work. And it really speaks to me, this idea and this ability to use concepts that are larger than us individually as guides for life. We get so caught up in thinking that I'm alone and I have to figure this out all on my own, and ignore the fact that there are guides, there are models for what it is we're going through. And the map is not the territory. So we don't have to worry that what is in a myth or in an archetype defines who we are, but it shows us the possibility for things. It gives us a sense of what has been done since time immemorial. We also have this sense that we're unique, and nobody has ever lived the life or experience we have. And of course, on some level, that's true because nobody's has our specific experience. But our journey from adolescence into adulthood, and whether that's education or marriage or work or whatever it is, and on into old age, right? Every human being shares these experiences, and so there are lessons, breaking down these ancient myths that still have relevance today, using them, as I say, as guidance, rather than this concept that they are fairy tales that are just nice stories. They are there if you choose to see them as as a guide. Um, so one of the things that I noticed, and interestingly, I just actually picked up on this now, that first block of sort of 31 through 36 for me was very much about my journey as a man, and where I am in my life today as a man. And just as a coincidence, the episodes 37 to 42 were all with women. And really look at the power of the feminine. And it was a great treat for me to connect with feminine and women in so many different guises. All the creative and destructive aspects of this archetype. To follow up on what I was just talking about, and that shows up in most of those conversations. Certainly with Daniela and Christina and Karina. I can't remember the others before that, but it really is central to this concept of this balance between these forces, these energies. Not that one is meant to overpower the other, quite the opposite. That you cannot have one without the other. That actually, and in our life and lives today, we are quite out of balance with that, and so there was this real beauty for me to connect with, to and be informed by something that is quite interesting, quite mysterious to me, and yet quite nurturing at the same time. In episode 43, I spoke with Lily Walford about healthy relationships. And again, it's funny how much comes out here and now in the speaking and the sharing of it. I didn't see this when I was taking notes and preparing for this, but the fact that this first 6 episodes of this review, I liken to the masculine aspect of myself and my place as a man, and these next 6 were about my connection with the feminine. It's quite lovely to see that episode 43 is about bringing those together, what it means to have healthy relationships, not only outside with somebody else, but actually with ourselves. And that really is the essence of this episode with Lily. She's an international dating coach, runs the company Love with Intelligence, and she really talks about that connect to others. We cannot really truly connect to others before we learn how to connect to ourselves, and that the way you see yourself is how you will play out your relationships. So I'm really fascinated by how this is playing out even in this review. The sort of the meta sense and awareness that we have to have those first 6 episodes about masculine, the next 6 episodes about feminine, and then we can bring that together. We can integrate that in this review, in ourselves, in myself, to be in and to create a healthy relationship. Lily and I speak about how our concept of ourselves and our concept of what we create and bring out in a relationship ultimately goes back to childhood. And we often forget that the choices we make today are essentially based on beliefs that we created as small children. And unless you start to see that, you're going to continually recreate the dysfunction and the pain that's unresolved from the past. In episode 44, I spoke to my good friend Ishik Tlabar and about the mission of magnificence. Ishik is somebody I've known for many years, who I could probably spend hours and hours having conversations with, and have, and still just start to uncover, what's available for each of us individually and collectively. She's an empowerment coach and working with breath. She does breath work, and most recently started doing naked breath work, which is breath work on its own, if anybody has done it, brings up a lot. It really exposes us to the fullness of our emotions, of our past, of what's there for us. And Ishik is is a very fierce warrior of truth, of naked truth. And we talk about how to bring connection, joy, and curiosity into life. And I think curiosity is the thing that really stands out the most from this episode. And I think what connects us as friends. We can often tend to think, or I can in my own past, that things have to be a particular way, or if I plan something, I expect it to go exactly as planned. And yet often that is exactly what does not happen. And the value of seeing the value, exploring the value, being curious about what happens when things don't go to plan. Really, really leaning into having fun with and cultivating this sense of curiosity, rather than taking things that happen personally, really using whatever's there. We have our plans, and we want to create whatever it is, a business, a relationship, a home, and then other things happen. And rather than having that as a stopping point, that may just be a new starting point. And curiosity is always about opening up the next level, the next door, the next possibility. In episode 45, I spoke with Ben Winter about greater or lesser expectations. Ben is the author of two books, Living Unscripted and What to Expect When Having Expectations. On that last one, spoiler alert, not a lot, because it goes to what I was speaking to Ishik about. When we have expectations, we expect things to go a particular way, and often life says, no, it's going to go very, very differently. Or maybe our spouse or our boss or the person in the checkout line ahead of us has very different ways of doing things. And we have an opportunity to take that personally, to assume that that's a stopping point and we're justified in being angry or getting even with somebody. Or we can use that as a starting point. Ben has more than 10 years experience working as an improvisation actor, and uses this as a lens for living his life. And I have some personal experience in improvisation, so Ben and I really talk through the nuts and bolts of what it means to be an improv actor. And many people think, well, going up on stage and doing improv is way too scary. But if you actually look at your life, no matter how much you think it's scripted and how much you try to script it, you are improvising life right here, right now, and always will, because you cannot determine everything that's going to happen to you today and the day after that and the day after that. And the beauty of this, of course, is that seeing, through this lens of improvisation gives gives you freedom, and it also gives you confidence. In improvisation, the practice has a certain set of rules, parameters, and structure. And one of the things that I use in my own coaching work, and really appreciate, is that structure has integrity. And people can put up whatever structures they want. Like the map is not the territory. A structure gives an idea, a sense of things, but it doesn't determine everything. And so, with a structure, however loose or tight that structure is, there's then freedom within that. In episode 46, I spoke with my good friend and fellow adventurer, fellow traveler, fellow explorer in all matters, Chloe Bourjalia, about finding what matters to you. As I said, Chloe is a fellow adventurer who really uses life as a journey, and helps other people do that. She's a fellow coach in the intuitive sphere. We trained together. We talk regularly, and so this was a great opportunity to kind of share what we've learned in this work and in our lives. And ultimately, Chloe's message is about going for what you love, and she helps and teaches other people to do that, to really stand in the unknown and yet the ultimate bliss and joy of going for what you love. She has a message that every breakdown is actually an opportunity for a breakthrough, and this, even as I'm speaking, I can see that this is a theme that's showing up in this sort of 6 episode little part, or whatever I want to call this setting of episodes, and that where we think things are ended is actually just a starting point. And she starts I shouldn't say she starts off. She says that adventure, the adventures that you want to go on, start with the values you have. So be very clear on what your values are, whether that's in a relationship, whether that's in business, whether that's in travel. That you once you're clear on your values, what comes, you will be able to deal with and handle. And ultimately, although it sounds a little bit cheesy and maybe overused, the key to following and creating your true nature is to listen to your heart, following your heart. And we share stories about what it means and how to do that in that episode. In episode 47, I spoke with Dr. Robert Yoho, about healthcare corruption. This was an unusual episode in a way, because I haven't had many episodes that are about the objective sense of what's happening in the world. I mean, they do touch on that, of course, but most conversations are about what somebody has gone through personally, individually. Dr. Yoho, had a very comfortable and advantageous life from being a surgeon, and he was ready to retire, and maybe he in fact did. And then his his adventure of self was that his training, his understanding of how the world works, how the medical world works, could not sit with what he was seeing in the outside world. And, although this tale, an episode, deals primarily, if not exclusively, with the U.S. healthcare system, I think it's considered generally applicable to certainly all Western healthcare systems, and the corruption that they face through big pharmaceutical and medical companies. And regardless of your politics and ideas about what's happening, you can see the absolute power of this industry in where we are in today's world. It was also, I'd say, probably our most controversial episode in terms of the comments and the follows we got, just because of what Robert was talking about. He's the author of the books Butchered by Healthcare and Hormone Secrets. Um, uh, yeah. In episode 48, we spoke with Amy Sinha about all that jazz. Amy is well, she's many things, and she talks about her transitions in life, how the challenges that she had as a young child facing, huge health problems that limited her ability to speak, to walk, and overcoming those through personal expression, and became a jazz singer, very talented one, um, and um, and and how she moved on from that and has moved on from being a jazz singer and now having a professional voiceover career. And Amy's one of these people who sees a challenge and instead of running away from it, runs even harder towards it, sort of doubles down and decides to create from the uncertainty that lies ahead, and creates new challenges for herself all the time. She sort of famously sat down to write a song, noting that as a jazz singer, almost every song that she would sing was either some standard that had been written 20, 30, 50, 80 years ago, or was being written by somebody else for her. And so she sat down to write a song, wondering whether she could. And 10 or 11 songs later, she had produced her first album. And so there was a lot of about her personal battle, as I say, of image and identity, and expression. And one of, I'd say, her catchphrase or mantra is that the impossible is always possible. And I think I also really noted that Amy, one of the things she brought home was this sense of appreciating achievement. Really acknowledging what she's done, whether that's in a day, in her career, in the music production of an album, or whatever it is, taking time to appreciate the achievements that you have. And quite poignantly, that brings us to our final sort of break in our 6-episode block review, before we move on to the final, and to really sit back and appreciate, for me, what we've accomplished this year. Episode 48 that I just mentioned, I was very aware that we were closing in on the big 5-0. Very sort of artificial, but nonetheless a big milestone for me and for us. It coincided with my personal life. I mean, I turned 50 a couple of years ago, so I was very aware of kind of what this meant from a sort of an outer or personal perspective, and then what it meant for the podcast. Again, it's an artificial number, but these round numbers we like to focus on. So it really got me to the sense of, well, what does this all mean? What does it mean to be producing this podcast? And got me to some of the reflection on putting this year-end review out. I also noted that I'd been in Greece over the summer. I've been traveling quite a bit, created a new love in my life, and so was traveling for that. And I really had a question and sense of like, well, how do I fit podcasting into a more itinerant lifestyle? In the past year, I'd say my life got more chaotic, more harkening back to the episode with Karina, more irrational and unsettled through the show. But if you've heard me speak on any other episode, and I'll say it now, that for me, it doesn't cause me consternation and anxiety. It is simply fuel for creating. In the world of creating, we talk about using our uncertainty, using our illusion, using the tension of not knowing something to create what you would love. And Amy's message that the impossible is always possible is a great demonstration of that. And I think I also had this sense, I was writing these notes, it was like, oh, now we're in the final countdown. We are in our final six, which has a sense of kind of like the big reveal, and yet they're just six other episodes, and we're just continuing to create more content, and each episode is a treat and a joy, and full of gold in itself. In episode 49, I spoke with Benedict Corkery about symbolism and story. And this was an unusual episode for me, because it had a sense of time travel or some sort of sci-fi experience. As I was speaking with Benedict, I had a sense of having a conversation with a younger version of myself. And I think we certainly reflect on that in the show and talk about life as metaphor, talk about the roots of symbolism. And so we have this kind of meta discussion about metaphor and symbolism, and then I'm able to see that my conversation with Benedict has this metaphoric and symbolic quality to it for my life, and hopefully for those of you listening as well. That maybe we the lives we live, we kind of tend to think very linear, and think we've got to get somewhere and we have to do something and accomplish something. And of course, once we accomplish one thing, it's not enough. We've got to go accomplish the next thing. And the sense of life as metaphor and symbolism is an understanding that maybe this is how we're supposed to live. Maybe seeing life as metaphor in itself is powerful. And Benedict reminded me and uses the quote from Tolkien that says, "Not all who wander are lost." And I want to even add to that. As I was writing it down, I thought, well, maybe not all who wonder are lost. Into, as I said, the big 5-0, episode 50. I was very mindful of this, and if you listen to episode 25 with Alice Mabin or my review of it last week, it came clear to me that I wanted to have on my mentor, William Whitecloud, as a guest, and to be the guest for episode 50. And sure enough, he came on, and we talked about creating as orientation. And this is really the central basis for what I do in life. It's how I created this podcast. It's how I live my life. It's how I coach people. It's how I how I travel, how I create relationships. To see my orientation, and maybe for you to see your orientation as life as creating, this improv, this curiosity, this ability to live from one's heart. William is a best-selling author of 3 books: The Magician's Way, The Last Shaman, and Secrets of Natural Success. His flagship training, Create Your Destiny, was taken online during the start of the pandemic and has been taken by, over 15,000 people over the last year and a half, and continues to grow. And it was such a in a way like a masterclass on creating. And this is probably a free course in and of itself, just to listen to this episode, to look at life as adventure. We really break down, and William breaks down this life of adventure and the adventure of self, and puts in the context of the hero's journey, that we are all heroes on our own journey, and that really this life is the only game we have in town. The only game we have in town. YOLO, you only live once, and that's a starting point, right? It's an orientation. It's a It's a way, it's a perspective on how to see who you are, where you're going. And like the myths and archetypes I spoke about Christina with in episode 44, this is a map, a model. The hero's journey is an opportunity for how you can view the life you are living or can live. And we talk about, even more fundamentally, the alchemical principles that underline William's work that you can use for creating that impossible beyond what you think is possible. In episode 51, I had an opportunity to speak with the Reverend Jim Lewis, who is a dear friend of my father, or was many years ago. And I had the opportunity to meet and work with Jim many years ago when I first met him. And this episode, Step Up to the Plate, was a remarkable opportunity to speak to somebody who has been on the front line of some of the most important issues over the last 50 years or so. An activist in as an activism as a call to life. So Jim has what may be called a complicated or quite remarkable career and life. He very early on was in the U.S. Marine Corps, and saw was in Southeast Asia before the Vietnam. It was called the Vietnam War, and then went into the ministry, became an Episcopal minister in the U.S. and an activist from that, and involved in some of the most important social issues around race and religion and education and housing and labor and health, AIDS, and motherhood, and really looking at some very difficult issues that don't necessarily have one solution, or bring us up against who we are as individuals, the lives we're leading. And Jim was on the front line of many of these issues, dealing with the likes of having death threats from the Ku Klux Klan in the textbook wars of Kanawha County, West Virginia in the 1970s, going on peace missions to Israel, to Iraq, Palestine, and Libya, and being at the forefront of things that, as I say, don't have easy solutions. Jim is one of the most vibrant men I've ever met, and yet at the age of 87, he still has a life in him and a willingness to share what he's learned throughout his lifetime. And I think that is one of the things that he really wanted, was the importance of passing the baton on to a younger generation, or younger generations, as all these fights continue in the world we have today. In episode 52, I spoke with Jeff Fetty about a storied life, and he has led a storied life. Jeff's another family friend who I've known for a few decades, and he is one heck of a character and a heck of a man, an artist. He's an internationally renowned blacksmith, working from his forge in rural West Virginia, and has produced pieces for the likes of the White House, author Tom Clancy, designer Yves Saint Laurent, and yet he's a good old boy from West Virginia, and has some amazing tales that he shares. There's at least 2 stories about rattlesnakes, and his experience with them, both spiritual and otherwise. He's just one of these people who is always in life, and famously, because he was also got quite into photography, photographed the surgery on his hand after he crushed it in a hydraulic press. And he talks about what it means to build business and be an entrepreneur, and the his understanding of art to be a craftsman in today's world, and what it means for him to be able to make his own tools, to always be able to make whatever he needs in life to for his art, for his craft, and for his heart. In episode 53, I spoke with former Navy SEAL, William Branham, and he shared 5 SEAL secrets. As I said, a Navy SEAL, William had over 25 years service in the U.S. military. And there are a couple of things about him. First of all, with all that experience, very physical work, he came back and suffered from significant physical and psychological turmoil and stress and pain, and both for himself and for his fellow service men and women, he learned how to deal with these pains, and has started a company around CBD, cannabinoid solutions to help people to deal with, as I say, both the physical and psychological, emotional issues around trauma and pain, and his company, Naked Warrior Recovery. And as I say, he reveals what he says are 5 SEAL secrets, but builds an acronym around NAKED to distill 25 years of experience into a way to create what you want in your life, and how to be naked. Naked, well, what does that stand for? To never quit, to accept failure, which is a great lesson, to kill mediocrity, to expose your fears, and to do the work. So we go through all of those in much more detail, and how actually to bring those into your life, for whatever it is you're facing. And as I said to William, I think the things that really stand out for me are accepting failure and exposing fears, because it's only through that sense of self, and an understanding of what we assume our limitations are, and pushing beyond those, and facing those, and just being very, very honest about those, that we actually learn and grow. In our final conversation of the year, episode 54, I spoke to Sean S.F. Banks about being unstoppable. And in a way, it's a great title to end our year and season on. Sean is based in Atlanta, Georgia, and has worked with youth and personal development for over 15 years. And, like many people who have been on the show, his tale is one of a personal choice and overcoming something, right? And what it means to bring and create something from one's heart. So Sean speaks about how when he was very young, very close aunt and cousin of his were killed in a domestic violence dispute, and it had a profound impact on him. And he made a promise that when he was older, he would give something, he would do something for the larger society, to address the pain, the personal trauma that he'd witnessed, and that had been caused in his family. And he never really expected, but found himself working with young people, and mentoring them, and setting up what is a metropolitan wide Camp Warrior King, which is really helping kids with the fundamental issues that they face. And we spoke about at the beginning these issues around social media that we're all sort of wrapped up in, and obviously these have a much stronger impact on children. So he talks about, and we talk about, influence, exposure, and confidence. Sean's written 4 books on the subject, and has created the International You Can Have It All Youth Conference and magazine, which goes far beyond the Atlanta region. So that brings us to the end of our review. I hope that some, if not all of these episodes, light a spark in you, whether it's through the words I speak today, or whether you choose to go back and listen to one, two, or all 54 of these episodes. They really are crafted and curated to support you, to inspire you, to engage you in your own adventure of self-discovery and self-expression. And so, this brings us to an end to this year. This is coming out on the 31st of December. You might not be listening to it until into 2022, but it's quite poignant to kind of bring all this to a head on the 31st of December. And where do we go from here? Well, I'm going to say that we are a little bit in the unknown. I had a calling a few weeks ago, doing some intuitive work to actually stop the podcast, to quit this, not quit, but to complete it. And it really surprised me a bit. I didn't quite know what to do with it. In fact, I spoke about what happens when we push away the things that we don't like. Well, for a few minutes or a few days, a few days, even a couple of weeks, I really sat on the intuitive guidance I got, which was to stop the podcast. And I took time to reflect on that. And what came out was to, complete on where we are. I don't know where we're going to go. My intention is to come back for season 2, sort of bigger, better, stronger, whatever, deeper, more profound, and to really build on what we have created. I believe we have a good foundation. We have a good following and good support from all of you who have listened and share the message, and to share the conversations we have. So thank you for all your support. I would say stay tuned. My intention is to come back for a season 2. And I'll also ask for a little bit further support. I asked at the beginning if you'd be willing to, follow us on various social media, support and subscribe to us on wherever you listen to this on, leave reviews, leave comments. It's not for me. We don't make any money from this show. This is about the mission, and it's through the likes of you as a listener that we grow, that we build this. And so I'll just make one last statement and request here, which is, if you have something that you like or don't like, or you would like to hear and see in this podcast, please contact us. Send us a message on Instagram or Facebook at The Adventures of Self. Send me an email. Our email address is theadventures@galliant.life. That's theadventures@GALLIANT.life. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love the support. I'm going to sign off now and wish you a very happy end of 2021, or start into 2022. The phone's ringing, the bells are ringing, celebrating all of this together. This is live. And so thank you all, and sending you lots of love. Thanks for the support, and wishing you the best in all of your adventures, wherever they may lead you. Please see your life as an adventure. Please go on your own adventure of self-discovery and self-expression, and let us know what adventures you are up to. Thanks, and we'll see you somewhere down the road.